You know, there's something about getting older that makes us all a little more set in our ways. And that's not always a bad thing. Wisdom, experience, and knowing what we like, those are gifts that come with age. But sometimes, without even realizing it, we pick up a few habits that might make the people around us uncomfortable. And here's the tricky part: no one tells us. Have you ever noticed someone hesitating before sitting next to you? Or a grandchild making an excuse to leave a little sooner than usual? Maybe a friend seems less eager to chat these days. It's easy to brush it off. Oh, they're just busy. But sometimes it's not them. Sometimes it's us. And that's a tough pill to swallow, isn't it? But here's the good news: awareness is the first step. If we can recognize these little habits, we can adjust them, not to please everyone else, but to keep our relationships strong, our interactions warm, and our golden years full of connection. So today, let's talk about some of those uncomfortable habits that might be pushing people away without us even realizing it. Now, I want you to know this isn't about criticism. It's about kindness, to ourselves and to those around us. We've earned the right to be comfortable, but it's also worth asking, are we making others uncomfortable without meaning to? Let's go through a few of these habits together, starting with one that might hit close to home. The art of sharing health details without overwhelming others. We've all experienced that moment when a simple greeting turns into an unexpected medical consultation. Someone asks, "How are you?" with polite interest, and suddenly we're describing our latest cholesterol numbers, knee replacement recovery, or digestive issues in vivid detail. While there's certainly value in being open about our health, especially with those who genuinely care, there's an important balance to strike between sharing and oversharing. As we grow older, health naturally becomes a more prominent part of our daily lives. Doctor's appointments fill our calendars, medications line our shelves, and new aches and pains seem to appear with each passing season. It's only natural that these very real concerns would find their way into our conversations. After all, when something occupies so much of our time and attention, it's bound to occupy our thoughts and words as well. There are several understandable reasons why we might share health details more frequently as we age. For many of us, discussing symptoms helps process our own concerns and anxieties. Verbalizing what we're experiencing can make abstract worries feel more manageable. There's also comfort in seeking validation, hearing that others have experienced similar issues or that our concerns are normal for our age. And among peers, shared health challenges can create bonds of understanding and mutual support. However, when health discussions dominate every conversation, it can create unintended consequences in our relationships. Consider the perspective of the listener. While they may genuinely care about our well-being, a constant stream of medical details can leave them feeling helpless, especially when they can't actually improve our situation. Many people feel uncomfortable discussing intimate bodily functions or serious health conditions, particularly in casual settings. Over time, they may begin to avoid certain topics or even limit interactions altogether to escape what feels like an endless medical update. I remember a conversation with my neighbor Linda, who confessed she'd started screening her mother's calls. "I love her dearly," she explained. "But every phone call turns into a detailed report on her latest doctor's visit, complete with test results and speculation about what might be wrong. I leave every conversation feeling anxious and drained, but powerless to help." This is the paradox of oversharing health details. What begins as an attempt to connect can actually create distance in our relationships. Finding the right balance requires awareness and intentionality. It's not about hiding our health challenges or pretending everything is fine when it's not. Rather, it's about being mindful of our audience and the purpose of our sharing. Close family members who are directly involved in our care, medical professionals, and support groups are all appropriate audiences for detailed health discussions. These are people who are equipped to handle the information and can offer meaningful support or assistance. In more casual or social settings, we might practice what I call conscious sharing. When asked about our health, we could offer a brief, honest update before gracefully shifting the conversation. For example, "I've been dealing with some arthritis flare-ups, but my new medication seems to be helping. How about you? How have you been feeling lately?" This approach acknowledges the question without letting it dominate the entire interaction. Creating health-free zones in certain activities or conversations can also help maintain balanced relationships. Meals, hobbies, and discussions about shared interests can be wonderful opportunities to connect about life beyond medical concerns. My friend Arthur, a spry 78-year-old, has a clever rule for his weekly coffee meetups with friends. The first 5 minutes are for complaining aches, pains, doctor visits. Then we move on to more interesting things, books we're reading, news about our families, memories we share. There are certainly times when health updates are necessary and appropriate, especially with close family who need to be informed about important changes. The difference lies in distinguishing between necessary sharing. I wanted to let you know I'll be having a minor procedure next week. And overwhelming sharing. Let me tell you about every specialist I've seen, all my test results, and my theories about what might really be going on. Ultimately, while our health journey is an important part of our lives, it's not the only part. By being mindful of how and when we share medical details, we preserve the richness of our relationships and ensure our company remains something people look forward to. After all, we are so much more than our ailments. We are repositories of wisdom, storytellers of experience, and cherished companions. When we allow all these facets of ourselves to shine through in conversation, we create connections that nourish both ourselves and those around us. The key is remembering that sharing should be a bridge, not a barrier, in our relationships. By bringing the same thoughtfulness to our conversations that we bring to our medical care, we can maintain meaningful connections while still honoring our need to express health concerns when appropriate. It's not about silencing ourselves, but about choosing the right moments, the right listeners, and the right balance that serves both our needs and our relationships. The well-intentioned trap of unsolicited advice. There comes a point in life when we've accumulated enough experience to feel we've earned the right to dispense wisdom. After decades of navigating careers, relationships, and life's unpredictable challenges, we've learned valuable lessons that could save younger generations from making the same mistakes we did. This impulse to share hard-won knowledge comes from a place of genuine care and concern. Yet so often, our well-meaning advice lands with a thud rather than the grateful reception we expect. The urge to offer guidance is particularly strong when we see our children or grandchildren approaching situations in ways we wouldn't. Watching a grandson consider an impractical college major or a daughter tolerate questionable treatment from a partner can trigger almost physical discomfort. We want to shout, "No! Don't make that mistake!" because we can see the potential pitfalls so clearly from our vantage point. In these moments, advice pours out almost reflexively. "You should. Why don't you? If I were you." But here's the uncomfortable truth we often miss. Unless someone specifically asks for our opinion, our advice, no matter how insightful, frequently feels like criticism to the recipient. That excited granddaughter sharing news about her first apartment doesn't want to hear that the neighborhood is dangerous or the rent too high. She wants you to match her enthusiasm, to celebrate this milestone of independence. When we lead with warnings or, better, suggestions instead of shared joy, the message received is, "You're not capable of making good decisions." Psychologists note that unsolicited advice often creates resistance rather than receptiveness. The human brain interprets unasked for guidance as a threat to autonomy, triggering defensive reactions. This explains why our carefully crafted suggestions are sometimes met with eye rolls or abrupt subject changes. It's not that younger people don't value our experience, they simply want to feel trusted to navigate their own paths, just as we did at their age. This doesn't mean we should never offer guidance. There are absolutely times when speaking up is crucial, particularly when someone's safety or well-being is at risk. If we notice a loved one showing signs of financial trouble, abusive relationships, or health neglect, sharing concerns becomes an act of love. The distinction lies in both the urgency of the situation and our approach. Instead of declarative, "you should" statements, we might say, "I'm concerned about," or "have you considered?" For less critical matters, developing the habit of asking permission can transform how our advice is received. Simple phrases like, "Would you like to hear my perspective on that?" or I've had some experience with similar situations. Would it be helpful if I shared what I learned? Create space for the other person to welcome our input rather than feel imposed upon. This small shift maintains their sense of agency while still allowing us to contribute our wisdom. Perhaps the most valuable skill we can cultivate is the ability to listen without solving. When a loved one shares problems, our instinct is often to fix rather than to simply be present. Yet most often, people don't want solutions, they want validation. A granddaughter complaining about a difficult boss usually knows she could quit or report the behavior. What she needs from us is, "That sounds really frustrating," rather than, "Here's what you need to do." The irony is that by resisting our initial impulse to advise, we often create conditions where our guidance is more likely to be sought. When people feel heard rather than lectured, when they trust that we'll respect their choices even when they differ from what we'd choose, they become more open to our perspectives. That nephew who ignored our career advice last year may come asking for it this year if we didn't damage the relationship by pushing too hard initially. There's also wisdom in recognizing that times have changed. The strategies that worked in our careers or marriages may not translate perfectly to today's world. When we acknowledge that our experience, while valuable, isn't the only valid approach, we position ourselves as thoughtful mentors rather than know-it-all authorities. Ultimately, the people we love need to make their own mistakes and forge their own paths, just as we did. Our role isn't to prevent every stumble but to be there with perspective when they're ready to hear it. By practicing restraint in our advice-giving and generosity in our listening, we preserve relationships while still being available when our hard-earned wisdom is truly needed. The art lies in understanding that sometimes the most powerful guidance we can offer is our patient silence and unconditional support. The weight of constant complaints, finding balance in expression. As we navigate the later chapters of life, we encounter very real challenges that can easily dominate our thoughts and conversations. Our bodies don't move with the same ease as before, the world seems to evolve at a dizzying pace, and losses accumulate in ways that can feel profoundly unfair. In this context, complaining becomes more than just venting, it's often an authentic expression of grief, frustration, and the very human need to be witnessed in our struggles. Yet there's a tipping point where sharing our burdens crosses into territory that inadvertently pushes people away, leaving us more isolated precisely when we need connection most. The psychology behind frequent complaining reveals a complex duality. On one hand, expressing dissatisfaction serves important functions. It helps us process difficult emotions, validates our experiences, and sometimes even bonds us with others facing similar challenges. That cathartic release when someone nods along to our complaints about aching joints or unreliable technology creates momentary solidarity. However, neuroscience shows that repeated negative talk actually reinforces neural pathways that make pessimistic thinking more automatic, creating a self-perpetuating cycle where we notice more to complain about. Consider Marjorie, a vibrant 72-year-old who gradually became known in her family as the complainer. What began as legitimate concerns about her arthritis pain evolved into a pattern where every conversation opened with grievances. The supermarket lines were too long, the television volume was never right, the mail arrived too late. Her children, who initially sympathized deeply, found themselves making excuses to cut visits short. Without realizing it, Marjorie had created an emotional tax on every interaction, where loving her meant steeling oneself for an onslaught of negativity. This dynamic doesn't mean we should plaster on fake smiles or deny our authentic experiences. The key lies in developing what psychologists call emotional agility, the ability to acknowledge difficulties while consciously choosing where to focus our conversational energy. When we catch ourselves launching into yet another complaint about the neighbor's noisy lawnmower or the high cost of prescriptions, we might pause to ask, is this something that truly needs voicing? Is this the right person to share it with? Is now the right time? The power of small linguistic shifts shouldn't be underestimated. Compare. These new phones are impossible to understand. With, I'm struggling with this new phone, have you figured out how to work yours? The first statement shuts down conversation in a cloud of frustration, while the second acknowledges the same difficulty but opens space for connection and potential solutions. Similarly, beginning interactions with positive observations. "Your garden looks lovely this time of year," rather than, "This heat is killing my flowers," sets an entirely different tone for what follows. Gratitude practice emerges as a powerful antidote to chronic complaining, not as a denial of hardship but as a balancing force. This doesn't require Pollyannish denial of real problems, but rather a conscious effort to also name what's working. The man who grumbles about his slow internet might also mention how grateful he is that his granddaughter taught him to video call. The woman frustrated with her knee pain could balance it by appreciating the neighbor who occasionally drives her to appointments. These small acknowledgments of goodness don't erase pain, but they prevent pain from erasing all other experiences. Social dynamics reveal an uncomfortable truth: humans are emotionally permeable. We unconsciously catch the moods of those around us, which explains why we feel drained after time with constant complainers and energized after time with those who face challenges with resilience. This isn't about judging anyone's right to express frustration. It's about recognizing that our words shape the emotional environments we inhabit, and that we have some agency in that creation. The balance lies in developing what might be called complaint literacy, the ability to distinguish between necessary expressions of distress that foster connection and habitual negativity that pushes people away. Some complaints need to be spoken aloud to caring listeners. Others are better processed through journaling, discussed with therapists, or reframed through personal reflection. The wisest among us learn to ask, will giving voice to this improve my situation or my relationships? Or will it simply spread my frustration without relief? In the end, our conversations in later life become part of our legacy, not because we must pretend to constant cheer, but because we demonstrate how to face life's inevitable difficulties with both honesty and grace. By mindfully balancing our complaints with appreciation, our frustrations with humor, and our losses with gratitude for what remains, we craft an emotional climate that others want to share. And in doing so, we ensure that when we truly need to voice our pains and fears, loving ears will be there, ready to listen. Now, these first few habits are just the beginning. They're things we might not even realize we're doing, but with a little attention, we can make our interactions smoother and more enjoyable for everyone. And the best part? Adjusting these habits doesn't mean changing who we are, it just means being mindful of how we connect with others. So let's keep going. Because the next few habits we'll talk about might surprise you, and they're just as important to recognize. Let's continue exploring some of these habits, not to make anyone feel guilty, but to bring a little more awareness to the way we interact with the world. Because at the end of the day, connection is what makes life rich, and a few mindful tweaks can go a long way. The next habit? Interrupting or dominating conversations. Now, we've all been in chats where one person does most of the talking. And sometimes, let's be honest, that person is us. Maybe it's because we have so many stories to share, or maybe we just get excited and jump in before others finish their thoughts. But when we don't leave space for others to speak, it can leave them feeling unheard or even unimportant. Think about the last time you were in a group conversation. Did you pause to let others contribute? Or did you find yourself steering every topic back to your own experiences? It's natural to want to share. After all, we've lived full lives. But great conversations are like a dance. Sometimes we lead, sometimes we follow. Try asking questions, listening fully, and resisting the urge to jump in with, "That reminds me of the time unless it truly adds to the discussion. Then there's being overly critical of younger generations. The classic. Kids these days. It's easy to shake our heads at how things have changed. The way people dress, the slang they use, their work ethic, or what we perceive as a lack of it. But here's the thing, every generation has said this about the next one. Our parents probably sighed at our music, our fashion, our attitudes. And now, we catch ourselves doing the same. The problem isn't noticing differences, it's when we voice those criticisms in ways that make younger people feel judged or dismissed. A grandchild might stop sharing their interests if they hear, "That's not real music," or, "In my day, we respected our elders." Instead, what if we ask curious questions? "Tell me about this new app you love." Or, what's exciting to you about this trend? We might not always get it, but showing interest builds bridges instead of walls. And another subtle one, neglecting personal grooming. This is a touchy subject, because aging brings real challenges. Arthritis makes buttoning shirts harder, bending to trim toenails isn't as simple, and sometimes we just don't see the point in dressing up if we're not going anywhere. But like it or not, appearance affects how others interact with us. Unkempt hair, strong body odor, or stained clothing can make people hesitant to sit close or engage. Now, this isn't about vanity, it's about comfort, both ours and theirs. Small things matter: a fresh shirt, a quick comb through of the hair, a spritz of a favorite cologne or perfume. If mobility is an issue, maybe it's time to simplify. Elastic waistbands, slip-on shoes, or even asking a family member or caregiver for occasional help with grooming. When we take care of ourselves, people respond more warmly, and we often feel better too. One more for this section: being resistant to change. Change is hard at any age, but after a certain point, it can feel exhausting to keep up. New technology, shifting social norms, even rearranged grocery store aisles. It's tempting to dig in our heels and say, "That's not how it's supposed to be." But when we reject every change outright, we risk isolating ourselves. Imagine a grandchild excited to show us how to video call, only to be met with, "I don't need that complicated nonsense." That excitement turns to disappointment, and eventually, they might stop trying to include us in new things. Now, we don't have to love every trend, but what if we tried a middle ground? "I'm not great at this, but I'd love for you to teach me." Or, "Let me give it a try, be patient with me." Staying open, even just a little, keeps us connected to the people who matter. Now, these habits aren't about fixing ourselves to please others. They're about choosing how we show up in the world. Because the truth is, people want to be around us. They value our stories, our wisdom, our love. But small tweaks in how we communicate and present ourselves can make those connections even stronger. And there are still a few more habits worth discussing, ones that might be harder to see in ourselves but make a big difference in how others feel when they're with us. So let's keep going, gently and with kindness, because every relationship we nurture is worth the effort. You know, as we've been talking about these habits, I've been thinking about my own grandfather, a wonderful man who lived to be 94. He had this incredible ability to make everyone around him feel valued, but he also had a few, let's call them, quirks, that sometimes made visits a little challenging. Like how he'd always insist on telling the same stories repeatedly, convinced we'd never heard them before. We loved him dearly, but I'll admit, there were moments we'd exchange glances when he launched into that familiar tale about the 1947 blizzard again. That's the thing about these habits we've been discussing. They come from places of genuine personality, experience, or even loneliness. But being aware of them? That's how we make sure our golden years are filled with warm connections rather than unintentional distance. So let's wrap up with a few final habits worth considering, starting with one that's especially common. Repeating stories or questions frequently. Memory isn't what it used to be for many of us, and that's perfectly normal. But when we tell the same story multiple times in one visit or ask, "How's your job?" 3 times in an hour, it can frustrate others, even if they're too polite to say so. They might start shortening their visits to avoid the repetition. Here's a little trick: if you catch yourself starting a familiar story, pause and ask, "Have I told you about the time?" It shows you're considerate of their patience. And if you struggle with remembering recent conversations, jotting down notes after visits. "Jenny got promoted. Tom's trip to Florida," can help you pick up right where you left off next time. Next, invading personal space or boundaries. This one's delicate because so much of it comes from love. That urge to pinch a grandbaby's cheeks even when they squirm away, or to insist on hugs when a teenager clearly isn't comfortable. Or maybe it's showing up unannounced because, "I don't need an invitation." While our intentions are warm, ignoring someone's boundaries, even with family, can make them tense up whenever we're around. The fix? A simple question. "Can I give you a hug?" Or, "Would it be alright if I stopped by Thursday?" Giving people agency in how they interact with us actually makes them more likely to seek out our company willingly. And finally, playing the guilt card. You never visit me. I guess no one cares if I'm lonely. These statements might feel like honest expressions of hurt, but when used frequently, they become emotional manipulation, even if we don't mean them that way. Loved ones may start to dread calls or visits, associating them with obligation rather than joy. Try reframing. I always love seeing you. When's a good time for you to come by? Or, I miss our chats. Could we plan a phone date? It invites connection without pressure. Now, let's take a deep breath. If you've recognized yourself in any of these habits, please don't feel discouraged. We're all works in progress, and the mere fact that you've listened this far shows how much you care about your relationships. Here's what I want you to remember. These aren't flaws, they're just habits. And habits can be adjusted with gentle awareness. You don't need to change your personality or bite your tongue constantly. Small tweaks, like pausing before offering advice, keeping a gratitude journal to balance complaints, or asking, "Am I giving them space to talk?" can make all the difference. The people in your life want to enjoy their time with you. They cherish your stories, your humor, your hard-earned wisdom. By being mindful of these few uncomfortable habits, you're simply making it easier for them to lean in rather than pull away. So here's my challenge for you this week. Pick one habit we've discussed and observe yourself lightly. Not with judgment, but with curiosity. You might be surprised how small shifts create warmer connections. And I'd love to hear from you. Have you noticed any of these habits in yourself or loved ones? What strategies have helped? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your experience could help someone else. If this resonated with you, give the video a thumbs up. It helps others find it. And don't forget to subscribe for more conversations like this. Because life after 60 should be about joy, connection, and living fully, exactly as you are, with just a little fine-tuning. Here's to making every interaction count, and to relationships that feel as good for others as they do for us. Thanks for watching, and remember, you're never too old to grow. Until next time, take care of that wonderful heart of yours.